Have you ever seen someone destroy their entire career in under 5 minutes just because of their own prejudice? It's a level of karma that feels almost too good to be true. Picture this. A first-class cabin, a young black girl minding her own business, and a flight attendant who decided that this passenger didn't look the part. The attendant called the police. She screamed. She humiliated a teenager in front of a full flight. But what she didn't know was that the girl wasn't just a passenger. She was the daughter of the man who signed the flight attendant's paychecks. This is the story of Jessica Miller's worst and last day at work. The air inside the jet bridge at JFK International Airport was thick with the smell of jet fuel and the humidity of a rainy New York Tuesday. For most people, boarding a flight to London was a routine mix of stress and anticipation. But for Jessica Miller, senior flight attendant for Meridian Airways today, was just another headache in a skirt suit. Jessica adjusted her silk scarf, checking her reflection in the glass of the boarding door. She was 34, impeccably groomed, and possessed a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, a smile she reserved for high-value customers. She prided herself on maintaining the sanctity of the first-class cabin. In her mind, the front of the plane was a country club, and she was the gatekeeper. "Boarding groups 1 and 2, please have your passes ready." The gate agent's voice crackled over the PA system. Jessica stood at the entrance of the aircraft, greeting the elite passengers. A banker in a charcoal suit nodded at her. A famous Broadway actress gave a tired wave. Jessica beamed at them. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Henderson. Lovely to see you again, Ms. Albright." Then the flow of suits and designer handbags was interrupted. Walking down the jet bridge was a girl who looked no older than 19. She was wearing an oversized grey hoodie that swallowed her frame, black leggings and battered Converse sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in messy box braids, and huge noise-cancelling headphones rested around her neck. She held a boarding pass loosely in one hand and was scrolling through her phone with the other. Jessica's smile instantly evaporated. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the girl Diana Reynolds from head to toe. To Jessica, Diana looked like she belonged in the back row of a Greyhound bus, not stepping onto the plush carpet of a Meridian 787 Dreamliner. As Diana stepped onto the plane, she offered a small, polite nod. "Hi, good morning." Jessica didn't move out of the doorway. She planted her heels firmly, blocking the path to the left, the path to first class. "Economy is to your right, honey," Jessica said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet condescension. She pointed a manicured finger toward the long aisle leading to the back of the plane. "Row 30 and back. You're holding up the line." Diana paused, looking confused. She pulled her headphones down fully. "Oh, sorry, I think I'm in seat 1A. Jessica let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. It was loud enough that Mr. Henderson, the banker, already settled in. Seat 2A, looked up over his Wall Street Journal. 1A, Jessica repeated loud enough for the boarding passengers behind Diana to hear. "Sweetheart, 1A is a first-class suite. It costs $12,000 for this leg. Now please stop playing games and head to your assigned seat in the back. We have a schedule to keep." Diana frowned, her demeanor shifting from casual to slightly annoyed. She held up her phone, which displayed the digital boarding pass. "I'm not playing games. My name is Diana Reynolds. Seat 1A. Look." She tried to show the screen to Jessica. Jessica didn't even look at the screen. She swatted the air, brushing Diana's hand away, as if the phone were contaminated. "I don't need to look at a Photoshop job, miss. I've been flying for 10 years. I know who belongs in this cabin and who doesn't. We have a strict dress code and conduct policy in first class." "There is no dress code for paying passengers," Diana said, her voice steady but tightening. "And I'm not moving. You're blocking my seat." The line behind them was growing. A man in a blue polo shirt behind Diana sighed loudly. "Come on, let's go." "Some of us have connections to make." Jessica used the passenger's irritation as fuel. She stepped closer to Diana, invading her personal space. "You hear that? You are disturbing the peace. This is your last warning. Go to economy. Find an empty seat if you have a ticket, which I doubt, or I will have you escorted off this plane." Diana took a deep breath. She was young, but she held herself with a composure that contradicted her casual clothes. "I'm asking you one last time to scan my pass. If you scan it, it will beep green, and we can both move on." "I am not scanning a fake pass." Jessica snapped her professional mask, slipping completely. "You people always think you can scam your way into luxury. Not on my flight. Not today." The phrase "you people" hung heavy in the recycled air. The cabin went silent. Mr. Henderson lowered his newspaper completely. A woman in row 3 whispered to her husband. Diana's eyes hardened. "Okay," Diana said quietly. "You don't want to scan it?" "Fine." Diana sidestepped Jessica with a quick, fluid motion and walked straight into the first-class cabin, dropping her backpack onto the leather seat of 1A. Jessica gasped. It was a sound of pure outrage. She spun around, her face flushing a deep, blotchy red. "Excuse me. You cannot just get up. Get up right now." Jessica stormed over to seat 1A, grabbing the strap of Diana's backpack. "I'm calling the captain." "No, I'm calling the police. You are trespassing on a federal aircraft." Diana sat down, buckled her seatbelt, and looked Jessica dead in the eye. "Call them." The tension in the first-class cabin was so tight, it felt like a pressurized canister waiting to explode. The ambient boarding music, a soft jazz instrumental, seemed mockingly calm against the chaos unfolding in row 1. Jessica Miller was trembling, not with fear, but with the adrenaline of a power trip gone wrong. She marched to the flight deck interphone, snatching the receiver off the wall. She glared at Diana Reynolds, who had calmly taken out a tablet and was tapping away at the screen, seemingly unbothered by the woman threatening her freedom. "Captain," Jessica hissed into the phone, though she was speaking loud enough for the passengers to hear. "We have a security breach in first class. An unruly passenger. She refused instructions, physically pushed past me, and is squatting into seat 1A. She's aggressive. I need law enforcement immediately." She hung up and turned back to the cabin, smoothing her skirt. "The police are on their way," she announced to the room, casting a sympathetic look at the other wealthy passengers. "I apologize for this riff-raff. We will have her removed shortly, so we can enjoy our flight to London." Mr. Henderson, the banker in 2A, cleared his throat. "Excuse me, miss." Jessica turned to him, expecting support. "Yes, sir. Can I get you a pre-departure champagne while we wait?" "I just wanted to say," Henderson said, looking uncomfortable. "I didn't see her push you. She just walked around you." Jessica's smile twitched. "Sir, with all due respect, aggressive posturing is a form of violence. She is a threat to flight safety." 2 rows back, a younger woman started recording with her iPhone, hiding it partially behind her purse. 10 minutes passed. The boarding had completely stopped. The economy passengers were backed up into the terminal, groaning about the delay. Finally, heavy boots thudded down the jet bridge. 2 Port Authority officers squeezed onto the plane. One was a burly older man named Officer Kowalski. The other a younger, sharper-looking woman named Officer Diaz. Jessica rushed to them immediately, playing the victim with practiced ease. "Oh, thank God you're here. She's right there." She pointed an accusing finger at Diana, who was still seated looking at a spreadsheet on her iPad. "She assaulted me," Jessica lied effortlessly. "She stormed the cabin, refused to show a ticket, and threw her bag at me. I don't feel safe flying with her." Officer Kowalski frowned, looking at the young girl in the hoodie. He walked over to seat 1A, his hand resting near his belt. "Miss, I need you to stand up and grab your belongings." Diana looked up, removing her headphones again. She didn't look scared. She looked bored. "Did she tell you I have a ticket? The flight attendant says you refused to show documentation and forced your way on," Officer Diaz said, stepping closer. "If you don't have a ticket for this seat, this is theft of services and trespassing. If you touched her, that's assault." "I didn't touch her," Diana said calmly. "And I have a ticket. She refused to scan it because she didn't like my hoodie." Diana held out her phone again, the QR code for seat 1A, bright on the screen. Officer Diaz looked at the phone, then at Jessica. "Ma'am, she has a pass right here." Jessica waved her hand dismissively. "It's fake." "Look at her. Does she look like she dropped 12 grand on a ticket? She's probably using a stolen credit card or a hacked app. I want her off my plane. Captain's orders." Technically, the captain hadn't come out of the cockpit, trusting his head attendant to handle the unruly passenger. But Jessica knew that once she invoked the safety card, the police had to act. Miss Officer Kowalski said, his voice dropping an octave. "We can sort out the ticket validity at the station. But right now, the crew wants you off. You have to deplane. Don't make us drag you." Diana sighed. She locked her iPad and stood up slowly. "Okay, I'll get off, but I need to make one phone call before I step off this jet bridge." "You can call your lawyer from the holding cell," Jessica scoffed, crossing her arms triumphantly. "Actually," Diana said, her eyes locking onto Jessica's name tag, "I'm calling my dad." Jessica laughed out loud. It was a cruel, cackling sound. "Oh, honey, who's your daddy? Is he going to come beat me up? Is he the janitor at the terminal? Does he drive the baggage cart?" Diana didn't answer. She pressed a speed dial contact on her phone. She put it to her ear. The cabin was silent enough that everyone could hear the ringing tone. "Hey, Dad," Diana said. "Yeah, I'm at JFK. I'm on the plane. No, we haven't taken off. The senior flight attendant, Jessica Miller, is having me arrested. Yeah. She says I stole the ticket. No, she wouldn't scan it. She said I look like riffraff and that I'm dangerous. Yeah, the police are here. Okay. You're where? Okay. I'll wait." Diana hung up and sat back down. "I thought I told you to get up," Jessica shouted, losing her patience. "Officers arrest her." "My father is 2 gates away," Diana said, her voice dropping to a chilly calm. "He was in the Concorde lounge. He said to wait 2 minutes." "I don't care if your father is the Pope," Jessica yelled, her face contorting. "Get off this plane." "Wait," Officer Diaz said, holding up a hand. She was looking at the manifest on the wall tablet that Jessica had ignored. "Wait a second." Officer Diaz tapped the screen. "Reynolds?" "Diana Reynolds." She looked at the ticketing code. "Status VVIP, partner family." Diaz looked at Jessica with wide eyes. "Ma'am, do you know who this is?" "I don't care," Jessica shrieked. "She is disrupting my flight." Suddenly, the movement at the front of the plane stopped. The commotion in the jet bridge went silent. The heavy footsteps of a man running, not walking, but running, echoed down the tunnel. A man burst onto the plane. He was tall, wearing a bespoke navy suit that cost more than Jessica's car. He was out of breath, his face thunderous with rage. Behind him trailed 2 breathless personal assistants and the Meridian Airways station manager for JFK, a man named Robert Sterling, who looked like he was about to have a heart attack. The man in the navy suit didn't look at the police. He didn't look at the passengers. He looked straight at Jessica. "Dad?" Diana said quietly. David Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Global Logistics, the company that handled 60% of Meridian Airways' cargo contracts and held a 15% stake in the airline itself, stepped into the first-class cabin. Jessica's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She recognized him. Everyone recognized him. He had been on the cover of Forbes last month. David walked past the police officers as if they were ghosts. He stood in front of Jessica Miller, his presence filling the cabin. "Are you the one?" David asked. His voice wasn't loud. It was terrifyingly quiet. "Are you the one calling my daughter a thief?" Jessica swallowed hard, her throat clicking dryly. Mr. Reynolds, I didn't know." "You didn't know," David repeated. He turned to the terrified station manager, Robert Sterling. "Robert, is this how Meridian treats my family? Is this how you treat paying customers based on how they dress?" "Mr. Reynolds, please," Robert stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "There has been a terrible misunderstanding. Jessica, what have you done?" "She called the police on me, Dad," Diana said from her seat, finally looking vulnerable. "She told everyone I was a criminal. She wouldn't even look at my ticket." David Reynolds turned back to Jessica. His eyes were like ice. "Get your bag," he said. Jessica blinked, tears of panic starting to well up. "Sir." "Get your bag," David enunciated slowly. "You are not working this flight. In fact, Robert, I want her badge. Right now." The silence in the cabin was deafening. The twist had landed, and the karma was about to be served cold. The first-class cabin of the Dreamliner was usually a place of quiet luxury, smelling of leather and expensive perfume. Now it smelled of fear, specifically Jessica Miller's fear. David Reynolds stood in the aisle, a titan in a navy suit, blocking out the overhead lights. He didn't scream. He didn't throw a tantrum. He simply waited, his hand extended, palm open. "Your badge, Miss Miller," David repeated. His voice was dangerously level, a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. Jessica looked around the cabin, desperate for an ally. She looked at Officer Kowalski, but the burly policeman had stepped back, hooking his thumbs into his belt. He knew better than to interfere in a corporate execution. She looked at the passengers. Mr. Henderson, the banker, was studiously examining his cuticles. The Broadway actress was watching with wide, unblinking eyes. Finally, Jessica looked at Robert Sterling, the station manager. He was her direct superior's boss. He was the man who approved her holiday bonuses. "Robert," she pleaded, her voice cracking into a high, thin whine. "You can't do this. I've been with Meridian for 10 years. I have a clean record. This is just a misunderstanding. The girl Diana, she wasn't cooperating. I was just doing my job." Robert Sterling wiped a bead of sweat from his upper lip. He looked at David Reynolds, then at the terrified flight attendant. He knew the math. Jessica was a senior attendant, sure. But David Reynolds, his logistics company, moved $200 million of cargo with Meridian every year. If Reynolds walked, Meridian's stock would plummet by morning. Robert stepped forward. His face was pale but determined. "Jessica," Robert said, his voice trembling slightly, "hand over your credentials. Now. You are relieved of duty, effective immediately." "But who will work the flight?" Jessica gasped, clutching the silver wings pinned to her lapel. "I'm the purser. You can't fly without me." "We have a reserve crew member on standby in the terminal," Robert said coldly. "She's already on her way down the bridge. Now, the badge." Jessica's hands shook violently as she reached for her chest. Her fingers, usually so nimble when pouring champagne or demonstrating safety vests, fumbled with the clasp of her name tag. It felt like it was welded to her uniform. Every second stretched into an hour. Click. The pin came loose. Jessica held the plastic ID and the silver wings in her trembling palm. She looked at them, the symbols of her authority, the identity she had built her life around. Without them, she was just a woman standing in a plane she couldn't afford to be on. She dropped them into Robert's hand. They made a pathetic clatter. "And your company tablet," David Reynolds added, not taking his eyes off her. Jessica unslung her red leather duty bag. She pulled out the iPad, the same device she had refused to use to check Diana's status. She handed it over. "Officers," David said, turning to the police. "This woman is no longer a crew member of Meridian Airways. Therefore, she has no ticket and no business on this aircraft. I'd like her removed for trespassing." The irony hit Jessica like a physical blow. The air left her lungs. Officer Diaz, the female officer whom Jessica had tried to manipulate earlier, stepped forward. There was no sympathy in her eyes. "Let's go, ma'am. Grab your personal bag. You're leaving." I have to get my coat from the closet," Jessica whispered. "We'll mail it to you," Robert snapped. "Go." Jessica turned to walk off the plane. The walk from row 1 to the boarding door was less than 10 feet, but it felt like miles. As she passed Diana Reynolds in seat 1A, Jessica paused. She couldn't help it. Diana didn't look triumphant. She didn't smirk. She looked exhausted. She looked like a teenager who just wanted to listen to her music and go to London. She looked up at Jessica, her brown eyes sad and heavy. "I just wanted to sit down," Diana said softly. Jessica opened her mouth to speak, to lash out, to beg. She didn't know which, but Officer Kowalski put a heavy hand on her shoulder. "Keep moving," he grunted. Jessica Miller stepped across the threshold, off the plush carpet of the airplane, and onto the industrial grey rubber of the jet bridge. The moment her heel hit the metal, the heavy aircraft door began to swing shut behind her. Thud. The locking mechanism clicked. She was outside, alone, fired. Inside the jet bridge, the humid air hit her. She stood there for a moment, staring at the closed door. Through the small porthole window, she could see the movement inside the passengers, settling in the new flight attendant, rushing on board. The world was moving on without her. And then she heard it. From the other side of the glass inside the terminal gate area, the waiting passengers for the next flight were staring at her. Some were pointing, and worse, phones were raised. She realized with a sick, sinking feeling in her gut, the girl in row 3. She was recording. The flight to London was 6 hours and 40 minutes. For Diana Reynolds, it passed in a blur of awkward overcompensation. The replacement purser, a nervous woman named Sarah, treated Diana like she was royalty made of glass. She brought extra warm nuts before Diana even asked. She offered 3 different types of blankets. The Captain Harrison, personally came out of the cockpit before takeoff to shake Diana's hand and apologize for the unfortunate incident. Diana hated it. She hated the attention almost as much as she hated the discrimination. She just put her noise-cancelling headphones back on, pulled her hoodie up, and stared out the window at the Atlantic Ocean, wishing she could disappear. Her father, David, sat in seat 1E across the aisle. He spent the first hour of the flight on the plane's Wi-Fi, typing furiously on his laptop. Diana knew that look. He wasn't just working. He was going to war. Meanwhile, on the ground in New York, Jessica Miller's life was dismantling itself at the speed of fiber optics. Jessica had been escorted out of the secure area by the police. They stripped her of her airport security pass at the exit. She had to take the public air train to the employee lot to get her car. She sat in her Honda Civic, her hands gripping the steering wheel, shaking uncontrollably. Ideally, she should have gone home, poured a glass of wine, and stayed off the internet. But human nature is self-destructive. She opened TikTok. She didn't even have to search. It was already trending under the hashtag #Meridian Airways. The video had been uploaded by a user named @TravelWithTess. It had been live for only 90 minutes. It already had 2.4 million views. Jessica pressed play. The video was shaky, filmed from 2 rows back, but the audio was crystal clear. I am not scanning a fake pass. You people always think you can scam your way into luxury. Jessica watched herself on the tiny screen. She looked hideous. Her face was twisted in a sneer she didn't recognize. Her voice sounded shrill and hateful. Then the camera panned to the girl Diana. Calm, quiet, just asking for her ticket to be scanned. Then the climax. The camera captured the moment David Reynolds stormed onto the plane. The caption on the video read, "Flight attendant bullies girl for wearing a hoodie, doesn't realize her dad owns the airline, #karma fired." Jessica scrolled to the comments. There were 40,000 of them. User 123. The way she said, "you people," oh, she is done. Flygirl 99. I'm a flight attendant and we do not claim her. This is disgusting. Justice, Diana. Imagine losing a $80K a year job because you couldn't be polite to a teenager. Embarrassing. Dan, the man. I know this woman. She was rude to my mom on a flight to Miami last year. Her name is Jessica Miller. Jessica dropped her phone into the passenger seat as if it had burned her. She felt bile rising in her throat. They knew her name. She started the car and drove home, tears blurring her vision. She told herself she could fix this. She would call the union rep in the morning. She would say she was under stress. She would say the video was edited out of context. She would sue the girl for defamation. Yes, that's what she would do. She would sue. But the universe wasn't done with her yet. The next morning, Jessica didn't get to call the union. At 7:00 a.m., her phone rang. It was a New York number she didn't recognize. "This is Jessica," she croaked, her voice hoarse from crying all night. "Ms. Miller, this is Eleanor Vance, Vice President of Human Resources for Meridian Airways," a crisp, icy voice said. Jessica sat up in bed. "Eleanor. Hi. Look, I can explain. The passenger was aggressive, and the video doesn't show." "Ms. Miller, stop." Eleanor cut her off. "You are required to appear at the headquarters in Long Island City at 10:00 a.m. sharp for a formal disciplinary hearing. Bring your uniform and any remaining company property." "A hearing? That's good," Jessica stammered, clinging to hope. "So we can talk about this. Do not be late," Eleanor said, and the line went dead. Jessica showered and dressed. She put on her best business suit, not her uniform. She did her hair perfectly. She practiced her speech in the mirror. "I was following safety protocols. I made a judgment call that turned out to be wrong, but my priority was the safety of the aircraft." She drove to the headquarters. The building was a glass monolith reflecting the gray sky. When she walked into the lobby, the security guard, a man she had waved to every morning for 5 years, didn't smile. He looked down at his desk. "They're waiting for you in conference room B, Jessica." She walked down the long hallway. The walls were lined with posters of smiling flight attendants and happy passengers. The slogan, "Meridian Rising Above," seemed to mock her. She opened the door to conference room B. She expected Eleanor Vance. She expected a union rep. Instead, she walked into a tribunal. Eleanor Vance was there at the head of the table. To her right was the director of in-flight services. To her left was a man Jessica had only seen on TV, the general counsel for Meridian Airways. And in the corner, sitting in a leather chair, looking out the window at the skyline, was David Reynolds. Jessica froze in the doorway. "Mr. Reynolds, I didn't know you would be here." David turned slowly. He looked fresh, rested. He had flown to London, done his business, and flown back on the red-eye just to be here. "I wouldn't miss this, Jessica," David said softly. "Please, sit down." Jessica sat. The leather chair felt cold. Eleanor Vance slid a single piece of paper across the mahogany table. "Ms. Miller." Eleanor began, her voice devoid of emotion. "We have reviewed the incident report from Flight 880. We have reviewed the statements from the airport police, the station manager, and 7 witness statements from passengers in the first-class cabin. And of course, we have reviewed the video footage, which currently has 12 million views." "It was taken out of context," Jessica blurted out. "The girl, Diana, she was wearing a hoodie. She looked suspicious. I was just trying to protect the first-class cabin." "Suspicious?" David Reynolds spoke up. He leaned forward. "What is suspicious about a hoodie?" "Jessica, is it the fabric or is it the person wearing it?" Jessica stammered. I just meant she didn't fit the profile." "The profile," David repeated, tasting the word like poison. "You profiled my daughter. You assumed that because she is black and young, she could not possibly afford a seat on your plane. You didn't check her ticket. You didn't ask her name. You threatened her with arrest." "I was stressed," Jessica cried. "We've been short-staffed." "This isn't about stress," the general counsel interjected smoothly. He tapped the paper on the table. "This is a termination notice, effective immediately, for gross misconduct, discriminatory behavior, and violation of the Meridian Airways Code of Ethics." "You can't just fire me." Jessica stood up, her face flushing red. "I have rights. The union has already reviewed the footage," Eleanor Vance said quietly. "They are not contesting the termination. They have withdrawn their support." Jessica felt the room spinning. No union. That was impossible. The union defended everyone, even the drunks. Furthermore, the general counsel continued, "Meridian Airways is stripping you of your flight benefits. You are permanently banned from flying with Meridian or any of our partner airlines. And given the severity of the public relations disaster you have caused, we are issuing a press release within the hour, stating that you have been terminated to uphold our company values." "A press release?" Jessica whispered. "You're going to name me?" "The internet already named you, Jessica," David said. He stood up and buttoned his jacket. "We are just confirming it. You wanted to be the gatekeeper. You wanted to decide who gets to fly and who doesn't. Well, now you don't get to fly at all." David walked towards the door. He stopped as he passed her chair. "My daughter cried for 3 hours in the lounge in London because of you," David said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "She thought she had done something wrong. She thought she didn't belong. You made her feel small. So now I'm making sure the world knows exactly how small you are." He walked out. Eleanor Vance pointed to the paper. Sign it, Jessica, and then get out. Jessica looked at the paper. Termination for cause. She signed it. Her signature was a jagged scrawl. She walked out of the headquarters into the bright, blinding sunlight of Queens. She took her phone out of her pocket. She had hundreds of notifications. She opened LinkedIn. She was going to try to delete her profile, but she saw a notification at the top. It was a new post from the official Meridian Airways page. Meridian Airways has zero tolerance for discrimination. We can confirm that the employee involved in the incident on Flight 880 has been terminated effective immediately. We stand with the Reynolds family and all our passengers. Under the post, there were comments cheering. Jessica Miller realized then that the karma wasn't just hitting her, it was burying her. But she still had one card left to play, or so she thought. She wiped her eyes. If she couldn't work, she would sue. She would turn herself into the victim. She would go on talk shows. She would spin this. She dialed the number of a high-profile injury lawyer she had seen on billboards. "Hello," she said into the phone, trying to sound confident. "I've been wrongfully terminated. I want to sue a billionaire." On the other end of the line, the receptionist paused. Is this the flight attendant from the video?" "Yes," Jessica said. "One moment." The line clicked. Then a dial tone. They had hung up on her. Jessica stood on the sidewalk, the busy city rushing past her, realizing that for the first time in her life, she was completely and utterly grounded. 3 weeks had passed since the incident on the Dreamliner. For most of the world, the news cycle had moved on. But for Jessica Miller, time had stopped. Her apartment in Queens, once a sanctuary of scented candles and order, was now a bunker. The blinds were drawn tight. Takeout boxes piled up on the counter. She hadn't left the building in days, terrified that a neighbor would recognize her as the Airport Karen, a moniker the internet had affectionately bestowed upon her. Her bank account was bleeding, without her salary and with her severance package denied due to gross misconduct. The walls were closing in. But Jessica wasn't grieving. She was seething. She paced her living room, clutching her phone. She had convinced herself of a new narrative. She was the victim. She was the martyr of a corporate machine that cared more about woke politics and a billionaire's feelings than the safety of its crew. "They threw me to the wolves," she muttered to the empty room. "I need to tell my story." She found her outlet not in a courtroom, but on a live stream. She had been contacted by Barry Stone, a controversial shock jock podcaster known for hosting cancelled individuals. He promised her a platform to clear her name and expose the elite. Against the advice of her mother, the only person still talking to her, Jessica agreed to the interview. The studio was in a basement in New Jersey. It smelled of stale coffee and ego. Barry Stone, a man with a red face and a loud tie, leaned into his microphone. "We're live," Stone grunted. "Today we have Jessica Miller, the flight attendant who lost everything because she dared to ask for a ticket. Jessica, tell us what really happened in that cabin." Jessica leaned into the mic. She had rehearsed this. She put on her best, sympathetic flight attendant voice. "Barry, it was terrifying." She lied, her voice quavering slightly. "This passenger, she was erratic. She was aggressive. You have to understand, we are trained to spot threats. She refused to make eye contact. She was hiding her face. When I asked for her pass, she lunged at me. The video was edited. They cut out the part where she threatened me." "And the father," Stone prodded. "The billionaire, he bought my silence," Jessica said, gaining confidence. He used his money to bully the airline. I'm a single woman working hard, and this billionaire comes in and snaps his fingers and I'm on the street. It's class warfare, Barry." For a moment she felt triumphant. The live comments on the side of the screen were scrolling fast. Some were supportive. "Stand your ground, Jessica corporate tyranny." But then the tide turned. Barry Stone looked at his producer, who was waving frantically from the control booth. Jessica, we have a caller on the line. They say they were on the flight." Jessica froze. "A caller? Put 'em through," Stone said, sensing drama. A voice crackled over the speakers. It was crisp, articulate, and undeniably British. "Hello," the voice said. "My name is Julian Thorne. I am a theatre director in London. I was sitting in seat 2D directly across from the incident." Jessica's stomach dropped. She remembered him. The man who had requested the vegan meal option before boarding. "Go ahead, Julian," Stone said. "I am listening to this woman speak." Julian said, his voice dripping with disdain. "And I have never heard such absolute rubbish in my life. That young girl Diana was barely audible. She was polite, she was small. The only person screaming, the only person acting like a lunatic, was you, Jessica." "That's not true," Jessica shouted, breaking character. "You're lying. You're probably paid by Reynolds." "And," Julian continued, ignoring her, "I have sent a video to your producer, Barry. It's from my own phone. It shows the 5 minutes before the viral clip. It shows Jessica Miller pushing the girl's shoulder, physically pushing her." Barry Stone's eyes went wide. He looked at his screen. The producer had loaded the clip. There it was, high definition. Jessica's face twisted in anger, shoving Diana Reynolds back toward the jet bridge wall. "Economy is that way, honey." The push was undeniable. It was assault. "Well," Barry Stone said, an awkward silence filling the room. "That looks pretty clear, Jessica." It was a safety maneuver," Jessica stammered, sweat beading on her forehead. "It looks like assault," Stone said, leaning back, distancing himself from his guest. "And we have about 10,000 comments calling you a liar. I think we're going to take a break." The feed cut. Jessica sat in the silence of the basement studio. She realized with a cold horror that she hadn't cleared her name. She had just dug her grave deeper. She had gone from incompetent to malicious in the eyes of the world. She walked out of the studio into the rainy New Jersey night. Her phone buzzed. It was her landlord. "Jessica. I saw the video. The new one. I don't want trouble at my building. We need to talk about your lease renewal, or lack thereof." Denial is a powerful drug, and Jessica Miller was an addict. Despite the disastrous interview, despite the eviction notice, she found a lawyer. Samuel Hines was a strip mall attorney who usually handled slip-and-fall cases, but he smelled a settlement. He convinced Jessica that Meridian Airways would pay her to go away just to stop the bad press. They filed a wrongful termination suit claiming emotional distress and defamation. They demanded $5 million. Meridian Airways didn't offer a settlement. They offered a court date. 6 months later, Jessica sat in a glass-walled conference room in Manhattan. It was the law offices of Graves and Sterling, the most expensive corporate defense firm in the city. Across the table sat Jonathan Graves, a man who looked like he was carved out of granite. He was David Reynolds' personal attorney, and he had taken over the defense for the airline. There was no judge here yet. This was a deposition, a pre-trial questioning under oath. Jessica sat next to her lawyer, Samuel Hines, who looked cheap and nervous in his ill-fitting suit. "Ms. Miller," Jonathan Graves began. He didn't even look up from his file. You are claiming that your termination was unjust and that you were not discriminatory. Is that correct? Yes, Jessica said, chin up. I was following protocol. Protocol, Graves repeated. He placed a single sheet of paper on the table and swore, Miss Miller, are you aware that we have subpoenaed your employee personnel file? I have a clean record, Jessica scoffed. Ask anyone. A clean public record, Graves corrected. But internal complaints are a different matter. Tell me, do you remember a passenger named Elijah Vance from a flight to Atlanta in 2019? Jessica blinked. The name sounded vaguely familiar. Mr. Vance filed a complaint, stating that you refused to hang up his suit jacket in the first-class closet, claiming it was full, despite him seeing you hang up a white passenger's coat 2 minutes later. Do you recall this? The closet was full, Jessica snapped. I can't remember every coat. Do you remember Dr. Sarah Okonjo, a neurosurgeon flying to Zurich in 2021? Graves continued flipping a page. She complained that when she responded to a call for a doctor on board, you told her to sit down and ask to see her medical license, but you didn't ask the white male paramedic who stood up 3 rows back. Jessica's mouth went dry. I was verifying credentials. That is standard safety. It seems your safety standards only apply to people of a certain complexion. Graves said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly low volume. He opened a laptop on the table. But this is the one that interests me the most. He turned the screen toward her. It wasn't a video. It was a chat log. This is a screenshot from a private WhatsApp group chat between you and several other flight attendants. It is dated the morning of the incident with Ms. Reynolds. Jessica felt the blood drain from her face. She had deleted those chats. How did they have them? One of your former colleagues trying to save her own job provided us with the logs, Graves explained, answering her unasked question. He read from the screen. You wrote, Ugh, working the London leg today. Praying I don't get any ghetto upgrades in first class. I hate having to play waiter to people who don't belong. The room went silent. The word or hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. Samuel Hines, Jessica's lawyer, closed his folder. He physically moved his chair an inch away from her. Ms. Miller, Graves said, closing the laptop. This text message proves premeditated bias. It destroys your defense. It destroys your character. And if we go to court, I will project this message onto a 10-foot screen for a jury to see. Jessica began to cry. Not the fake tears from the interview, but real ugly sobs of realization. Please, she whispered, I'll drop the lawsuit. Just don't release that. Oh, we're not just going to release it, Graves said, leaning forward. We are countersuing. Jessica looked up, eyes wide. What? Meridian Airways is countersuing you for breach of contract and reputational damage. And Mr. Reynolds is countersuing you personally for the legal fees incurred by his family. Graves slid a document across the table. This is a settlement offer. You will drop your lawsuit. You will issue a public written apology to Diana Reynolds, approved by us. You will admit to your bias. And you will pay Meridian Airways a symbolic restitution of $50,000 to cover the delay costs of Flight 880. $50,000, Jessica shrieked. I don't have that, huh? I don't have a job. I'm getting evicted. Then I suggest you sell your car, Graves said coldly, or perhaps ask your mother for a loan. But if you don't sign this today, we go to trial, and when we win, the judgment will be in the millions. You will be garnished for the rest of your life. Jessica looked at Samuel Hines. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Sign it, Jessica, he muttered. I can't win this. With a shaking hand, Jessica Miller picked up the pen. She signed away her pride. She signed away her future. She signed the admission that she was exactly what the world said she was. As she left the glass office, stepping out onto the busy Manhattan street, she looked up at the sky. A plane was soaring overhead, climbing through the clouds toward London. She would never be on it. She would never be on any of them. She was grounded permanently by the weight of her own prejudice. It had been exactly 1 year since the incident on Flight 880. The world had moved on. The internet outrage had faded, replaced by the next scandal, the next viral villain. But for Jessica Miller, the consequences were etched into every single day of her new life. She wasn't flying to London or Paris anymore. She wasn't sipping champagne in the galley or looking down her nose at passengers in 1A. Jessica was standing under the harsh fluorescent lights of a discount clothing warehouse in New Jersey, tagging clearance items. Her feet, once used to heels, now ached in sensible generic sneakers. She had been forced to sell her car to pay the first installment of the settlement to Meridian Airways. She took the bus to work. The Airport Karen nickname had stuck just enough to make her unhireable in any customer-facing role in the city. No hotel would take her. No restaurant wanted the liability. This warehouse job, where she sorted boxes in the back, was the only place that didn't care about her Google search results. It was lunch break. Jessica sat in the cramped break room, eating a sandwich she had made at home. On the wall, a small, dusty television was playing the midday news. And finally today, the news anchor announced a heart-warming story from the aviation world. Jessica looked up, her heart skipping a beat. The screen cut to a live feed from JFK Airport. There, standing in front of a shiny new Meridian Airways jet, was Diana Reynolds. She looked older, more confident. She wasn't wearing a hoodie today. She was wearing a sharp blazer, though she still rocked her Converse sneakers. Next to her stood her father, David, beaming with pride. Today marks the launch of the Reynolds Meridian Scholarship for Diversity in Aviation, the reporter said. This $5 million fund will help young people from underrepresented backgrounds attend flight school. Diana stepped up to the microphone. She smiled, and it was a smile of genuine warmth, the kind Jessica had never been able to fake. A year ago, Diana said to the cameras, "I was told I didn't look like I belonged on a plane. I was told I didn't fit the profile. So I decided to change the profile. This scholarship is for every kid in a hoodie who dreams of being a pilot, an engineer, or a CEO. You belong here." The break room was silent. Jessica stared at the screen. She saw the flashbulbs popping. She saw the adoring crowd. She saw the logo of the airline she had given 10 years of her life to, now backing the girl she had tried to kick off. A co-worker, a young guy named Mike, crunched into an apple next to her. "Hey, isn't that the girl from that video last year? The one where the flight attendant got owned?" Jessica stiffened. She looked down at her sandwich. "Yeah," she whispered. "That's her." "Man," Mike laughed, shaking his head. "I wonder what happened to that flight attendant. Probably living under a rock somewhere." Jessica didn't say a word. She stood up, crumpled her wrapper, and threw it in the trash. The segment ended, and the weather report started. She walked back out to the warehouse floor to fold cheap grey hoodies for minimum wage grounded forever, while Diana Reynolds took to the sky. Jessica Miller thought she was the gatekeeper of the elite. She thought a badge and a uniform gave her the right to judge a book by its cover, but she learned the hard way that when you judge people based on appearances, you aren't showing their worth. You're showing your own lack of it. In the end, it cost her everything. Her career, her reputation, and her financial future. Meanwhile, Diana Reynolds used that same moment of hatred to build a legacy of inclusion. It's a brutal, beautiful reminder. Be kind to everyone you meet. You never know who they are or who they might become. But more importantly, it costs absolutely nothing to treat people with respect, but it can cost you everything if you don't. And that is the story of how one flight attendant's prejudice led to the ultimate instant karma. What do you guys think? Did Jessica deserve a second chance, or was the punishment exactly what she needed? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real-life dramas about justice being served, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Get her out of my sight. I don't care who she is. I paid $10,000 for this seat, and I refuse to sit next to her. The voice boomed through the first-class cabin of Flight 882, shattering the peaceful pre-flight atmosphere. Everyone froze. But the man screaming wasn't just any passenger. He was Alistair Sterling, a media tycoon used to getting exactly what he wanted. The woman he was screaming at. She hadn't said a word. She just adjusted her glasses and continued reading her file. He thought he was humiliated her. He had no idea that he was screaming at the one woman who could ground his entire private fleet with a single signature. This is the story of how arrogance met authority, and why you should never judge a book by its cover. The humid July air of JFK International Airport did not penetrate the climate-controlled serenity of the first-class lounge, but the tension radiating off Alistair Sterling was enough to heat the room. Alistair was a man who wore his wealth like a suit of armor, specifically a bespoke Brioni suit that cost more than most people's cars. He was the CEO of Sterling Media, a conglomerate that owned half the tabloids in the UK and a good chunk of the cable news in the US. He was 55, silver-haired, and possessed a jawline that seemed permanently set in a clench of dissatisfaction. He checked his watch, a Patek Philippe Nautilus, and scowled. "The flight is boarding in 10 minutes, he snapped at his personal assistant, a young man named Timothy, who looked as if he hadn't slept since the previous administration. "Ensure the pre-boarding champagne is chilled, not the Prosecco swill they serve the tourists, the Dom. And make sure seat 1A is prepped. I don't want to see a single crumb." "Yes, Mr. Sterling. I've already called the concierge," Timothy stammered, typing furiously on his tablet. Alistair didn't wait for the answer. He strode out of the lounge, bypassing the line of weary travelers at gate 42. He flashed his Platinum Elite card at the gate agent, a sweet-faced woman named Sarah, without even making eye contact. "Mr. Sterling, welcome back," Sarah said, scanning his boarding pass. "We have you in 1A today. Enjoy your flight to London Heathrow." He grunted a response and marched down the jet bridge. This was his sanctuary. The 7-hour flight across the Atlantic was the only time Alistair could truly disconnect from the incompetence of his subordinates. He expected silence. He expected subservience. And above all, he expected exclusivity. He stepped onto the plane, inhaling the scent of leather and recycled air. The first-class cabin on this particular Boeing 777 was configured in a 1-2-1 layout, meaning exclusivity was guaranteed. Or so he thought. He turned left toward seat 1A, ready to toss his jacket to the flight attendant and demand a scotch, but he stopped dead in his tracks. Someone was already in the aisle, settling into seat 1A. Or rather, there was a mix-up. The person wasn't in 1A. They were in 1B, the aisle seat, directly across from his window seat. But their bag, a sleek, understated Toomey carry-on, was currently occupying the overhead bin directly above his seat. It was a woman. She was black, perhaps in her late 40s, wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and dark trousers that looked comfortable but expensive. Her hair was pulled back in an elegant, low bun. She was currently standing lifting a heavy leather portfolio into the bin. Alistair cleared his throat loudly. "Excuse me." The woman paused and looked down. Her eyes were calm, framed by thin gold-rimmed glasses. "Yes?" "You are blocking my seat," Alistair said, his voice dripping with irritation. "And that bin is reserved for seat 1A. Specifically, me." The woman smiled politely, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Actually, the bins are shared in the first row, sir. My seat is right here in 1B. There's plenty of room for both." "I don't share," Alistair sneered. "Move it. Put it back in economy where it belongs." The cabin went silent. The flight attendant, a seasoned purser named Beatrice, with 20 years of flying experience, hurried over. She had seen Alistair's name on the manifest and had been dreading this moment. "Mr. Sterling," Beatrice said, her voice soothing but firm. "Is there a problem?" "Yes, Beatrice, there is," Alistair said, reading her name tag with disdain. "This individual is cluttering my personal space. I specifically requested a private environment. I cannot have someone shuffling papers and breathing down my neck for 7 hours. Move her." The woman in 1B slowly lowered her arm. She didn't look angry. She looked curious. She turned to Alistair, her voice steady and low. "Sir, I have paid for my ticket, just as you have. My bag is within the regulation size. I suggest you take your seat so we can depart on time." Alistair laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "You paid, did you now? Or was this an affirmative action upgrade, a charity seat?" The air in the cabin seemed to vanish. A young couple in row 2 exchanged horrified looks. "Mr. Sterling," Beatrice interjected, stepping between them. "That is inappropriate. This passenger is a valued customer just like you. Please take your seat." "I will not," Alistair declared, slamming his hand against the bulkhead wall. "I am Alistair Sterling. I spend $500,000 a year with this airline. I demand you move her to the back. Put her in business. Put her in the cargo hold, for all I care. But I want 1B empty. Or I want a different neighbor. Someone who fits the aesthetic of first class." The woman whose name was Dr. Olivia Bennett finally fully turned to face him. She wasn't intimidated. She adjusted her glasses again. "Mr. Sterling," Olivia said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously calm. "I am going to give you one chance to sit down and be quiet. You have no idea who I am. And frankly, your ignorance is the only thing protecting you right now." Alistair leaned in his face, inches from hers. "I know exactly what you are. You're a nuisance. Now get up." Beatrice the purser was shaking. In her 2 decades of flying, she had dealt with drunks, minor celebrities, and crying toddlers, but she had never seen such naked, virulent aggression in the first-class cabin. "Sir," Beatrice said, her voice hardening, "you are delaying the flight. If you do not sit down, I will have to inform the captain." "Go ahead," Alistair shouted, throwing his arms up. "Get the captain. Tell him Alistair Sterling is being harassed by the staff and a passenger who refuses to follow protocol. In fact, get him out here right now. I want to look him in the eye when I tell him I'm pulling my corporate contract with this airline." Olivia sighed. It was a long, tired sound. She reached into her purse and pulled out a phone, but she didn't make a call. She simply placed it on the armrest screen, down. She sat down in seat 1B, crossed her legs, and opened a file folder labeled Federal Aviation Administration, Regulatory Oversight Committee. Alistair saw her sit and turned purple. "Are you ignoring me?" "I am ignoring your tantrum, yes," Olivia said without looking up. "I'm reviewing the quarterly safety audits for the transatlantic corridor. It's quite fascinating. Did you know that pilot fatigue is up 4% this quarter? You're certainly contributing to the stress levels." Alistair sputtered. He grabbed his phone and dialed a number. "I'm calling the CEO. I know Richard. We played golf at Augusta last month. You're finished. Both of you." At that moment, the cockpit door opened. Captain James Miller stepped out. He was a tall man, with broad shoulders and a no-nonsense demeanor. He adjusted his cap and looked at the scene, Alistair red-faced and standing Olivia calm and seated, and Beatrice looking on the verge of tears. "What is going on back here?" Captain Miller asked, his voice projecting authority. "Captain," Alistair pointed a finger at Olivia. "This woman is refusing to move. She's aggressive, she's rude, and frankly she's a security risk. I don't feel safe flying with her. I want her off the plane." Captain Miller looked at Olivia. She looked back at him, a faint smile playing on her lips. She didn't say a word. She just tapped her index finger on the folder in her lap. Captain Miller blinked. He squinted at the woman. Then his eyes went wide. The color drained from his face. "Ma'am?" Captain Miller said, his voice suddenly very gentle. Is everything all right?" "I'm fine, Captain," Olivia said smoothly. "Mr. Sterling here seems to be having a medical episode, or perhaps a behavioral one. He seems to believe he owns the aircraft." "I demanded she be moved," Alistair interrupted, oblivious to the change in the captain's demeanor. "Captain, if you don't remove her, I will personally ensure you are flying cargo planes to Alaska by next week. Do you know who I am?" "Captain." Miller looked at Alistair with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "I know who you are, Mr. Sterling, but I don't think you know who she is." "I don't care who she is," Alistair screamed. "She's a nobody, a diversity hire, That's enough," Captain Miller barked. The command was so sharp it silenced the cabin. "Mr. Sterling, you have violated federal aviation regulations regarding the interference with a flight crew. You are disrupting the safety and order of this flight." "I'm the victim here," Alistair insisted. "She's the one, sir," Olivia spoke up, closing her folder with a snap. "You mentioned you know Richard, the CEO of this airline." "I do," Alistair sneered, "and he's going to hear about this." "Good," Olivia said. She picked up her phone. "Because I'm having dinner with him and his wife Susan in London tomorrow night. We're discussing the renewal of the airline's operating license for the European sector, but I suppose I could call him now." Alistair froze. "What? You see—" Olivia continued, standing up slowly. She smoothed her sweater. "My name is Dr. Olivia Bennett. I am the chairwoman of the International Aviation Oversight Board. I don't just regulate this airline, Mr. Sterling. I regulate the skies you fly in. I sign off on the safety protocols, the route allocations, and the executive board appointments. And currently, I am evaluating whether this airline has sufficient protocols to handle disruptive passengers who threaten the safety of the crew." The silence that followed was heavy, thick, and suffocating. Alistair stared at her. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The arrogance that had fueled him seconds ago was rapidly being replaced by a cold, creeping dread. He looked at the captain. Captain Miller nodded solemnly. "She's the boss's boss, Mr. Sterling. Actually, she's everyone's boss." I didn't know," Alistair stammered, his voice shrinking. "Ignorance is not a defense, Mr. Sterling," Olivia said coldly. "It is merely an embarrassment. You wanted me moved. You wanted me off the plane." She looked at the captain. "Captain Miller," Olivia said. "I believe this passenger constitutes a security threat. He has been verbally abusive to the crew, he has made threats against your employment, and he has disrupted the pre-flight safety checks. Under FAA Regulation 91.11, no person may assault, threaten, intimidate, or interfere with a crew member. Do you agree?" Captain Miller didn't hesitate. "I do, Dr. Bennett." "Then I believe," Olivia said, her eyes locking onto Alistair's terrified face, "that it is time for Mr. Sterling to leave." Alistair's face went pale. "You can't do this. I have meetings in London, essential meetings, and I have a dinner to get to," Olivia said, sitting back down and opening her folder. "And I prefer not to be late." Captain Miller turned to Alistair. "Sir, grab your bags. You are being deplaned." "No." Alistair grabbed the armrest. "I refuse. I'm not going anywhere." "Then we will call the Port Authority police," Beatrice said, her voice laced with a newfound confidence. She reached for the interphone. "Don't you dare!" Alistair hissed. But the look in Olivia's eyes stopped him. It wasn't anger. It was total, absolute indifference. To her, he wasn't a titan of industry. He was a glitch in the system. And glitches were removed. The sound of heavy boots echoed from the jet bridge. 2 Port Authority officers appeared at the door. "There a problem, Captain?" the lead officer asked. "Yes," Captain Miller said, pointing at Alistair. "We have a disruptive passenger refusing to deplane. He has threatened the crew and harassed a federal official." The officer looked at Alistair. "Sir, let's go. The easy way or the hard way?" Alistair looked around the cabin. He saw the faces of the other passengers, people he considered his peers looking at him with disgust. He saw the young couple in row 2 filming him with their phones. He saw Beatrice crossing her arms, a look of triumph on her face. And he saw Dr. Olivia Bennett reading her report, not even looking at him. He grabbed his jacket. He grabbed his bag. "You will hear from my lawyers," he muttered, as he shoved past the officers. "This isn't over." "Oh, Mr. Sterling," Olivia said, just loud enough for him to hear as he reached the door. He turned back, sweat beading on his forehead. "It hasn't even started." The door closed behind him. The cabin erupted into applause. Olivia didn't smile. She just nodded to Beatrice. "Champagne, Dr. Bennett?" Beatrice asked. "Water, please, Beatrice. Sparkling. No ice." But as the plane taxied to the runway, leaving a fuming billionaire on the tarmac, Olivia knew that Alistair Sterling wasn't the type of man to let this go. He would strike back, and she would be ready. The walk from the jet bridge back to the terminal felt like a funeral procession for Alistair's ego. The Port Authority officers escorted him to the public concourse, their faces stoic, treating him not as a billionaire media mogul, but as a common nuisance. People stared. A teenager in a hoodie pointed. Alistair kept his head down, clutching his Toomey bag so tightly his knuckles turned white. Once he cleared the security checkpoint and burst out into the muggy New York air, the humiliation calcified into something colder and sharper, pure, unadulterated rage. His driver, a burly man named Gus, was waiting with the black Maybach. Gus opened the door, sensing the radioactive mood of his boss, and said nothing. Alistair threw himself into the back seat. "Get me to the office, now!" "Sir, I thought you were going to London," Gus asked, checking the rearview mirror. "Change of plans, Gus. Just drive," Alistair snapped. As the car merged onto the Van Wyck Expressway, Alistair pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking, not from fear anymore, but from the adrenaline of the hunt. He dialed a number he reserved for only the dirtiest of jobs. "Preston," Alistair barked the moment the line clicked. "I have a situation." Preston Ford was the editor-in-chief of the Daily Clarion, a tabloid that Alistair owned. It was a paper famous for destroying reputations with headlines printed in size 72 font. "Talk to me, boss." Preston's voice was slick like oil on water. "I was just kicked off Flight 8A2 to London. A woman, a bureaucrat named Olivia Bennett, orchestrated it. She claims she's the chairwoman of the aviation board. She used her position to intimidate the captain and have me removed." "Bennett," Preston mused. "Dr. Olivia Bennett. That's a heavy hitter, Alistair. She's squeaky clean. Harvard, MIT former pilot. She's the Iron Lady of the skies." "Nobody is squeaky clean," Alistair screamed, spittle hitting the leather upholstery. "I want her buried, Preston. I want a dig team on her past immediately. Ex-husband's unpaid parking tickets, angry interns, find me something." "We can do that, but it takes time. What's the angle for tomorrow's paper?" Alistair looked out the window at the grime of Queens passing by. He narrowed his eyes. "We don't wait for the truth. We make it. I want the headline to read, 'Aviation boss abuses power, kicks elderly passenger off flight for sitting in her shadow.'" "Elderly." Preston hesitated. "You're 55, boss. You're in your prime." "For the narrative, Preston, I am a vulnerable senior citizen." She was aggressive. She was hysterical. She played the race card. Spin it however you want, but make her look unstable. I want the narrative to be that she is an out-of-control diversity hire who is terrorizing paying customers. "Got it," Preston said, the sound of a keyboard clacking in the background. "I'll have a draft in 20 minutes. We'll blast it on the online portal within the hour. It'll be trending before she even lands in London." Alistair hung up. He wasn't done. He scrolled through his contacts until he found Richard Caldwell, CEO, Sky High Airlines. He didn't call. He texted. "Richard, your staff just humiliated me. Your regulator, Olivia Bennett, is out of control. Fix this or I pull the advertising contracts. All of them. Millions, Richard. Call me." He tossed the phone onto the seat next to him. He leaned back, closing his eyes. He pictured Olivia Bennett's calm, superior face. She thought she had won, because she had the badge. She had the authority. But Alistair had something more dangerous. He had the microphone. And by the time Flight 882 touched down at Heathrow Doctor, Olivia Bennett wouldn't be stepping off a plane as a respected chairwoman. She would be stepping into a meat grinder. 7 hours later, Flight 882 began its descent into London. Inside the first-class cabin, the atmosphere had been tranquil. Olivia had worked through the flight, declining the caviar, and the wine sustaining herself on sparkling water and the dense text of aviation statutes. She felt a quiet satisfaction. She had stood her ground, not just for herself, but for the principle of the matter. Men like Alistair Sterling believed the world was a vending machine that only accepted their currency. Occasionally it was necessary to remind them that the machine could also tip over and crush them. Beatrice the purser stopped by seat 1B as the fasten seatbelt sign dinged on. Dr. Bennett, Beatrice whispered, leaning in. I just wanted to thank you again. In 20 years, nobody has ever stood up for us like that. The crew, we really appreciate it. Olivia offered a warm, genuine smile, a stark contrast to the steel mask she had worn earlier. You did the hard work, Beatrice. You kept the cabin safe. I just quoted the rule book. Captain Miller radioed ahead, Beatrice added, her voice dropping lower. He arranged for a VIP escort for you at the gate, just to speed you through customs. That wasn't necessary, but it is appreciated. Thank you. The plane landed smoothly, taxiing through the grey English drizzle. Olivia packed her files, checked her phone, and frowned. She had 0 signal. Strange. Usually her global roaming kicked in immediately. She restarted the device as the plane pulled up to the gate. When the signal finally connected, her phone nearly vibrated out of her hand. 47. Missed calls, 112. Text messages, 3,000 plus notifications on X, formerly Twitter. She stared at the screen, her brow furrowing. The first text was from her deputy director in Washington, D.C. Olivia, don't talk to anyone. Legal is convening an emergency meeting. What happened on that plane? The second text was from her daughter. Mum, why are you trending? Who is Alistair Sterling? Olivia felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She opened her browser. The headline on the front page of the Global News Network, a Sterling subsidiary, screamed at her. Sky Rage, top aviation official, accused of assaulting passenger and abusing federal power. Below it was a grainy photo. It was from the plane, but the angle was manipulated. It showed Olivia standing over Alistair, her finger pointing her face, looking severe. Alistair was seated, looking small and defensive. The caption read, Olivia Bennett berates media mogul Alistair Sterling moments before ordering his removal. Oh, you petty little man, she whispered. Dr. Bennett. She looked up. A British Airways ground agent was standing at the aircraft door, looking anxious. The VIP car is waiting at the bottom of the stairs. We thought it best to bypass the main terminal. Why? Olivia asked, standing up and hoisting her bag. Because, Ma'am, the press is here. A lot of them. Olivia straightened her blazer. She put her glasses on. She didn't cower. She didn't hide her face. Let's go. They took a side exit down the metal stairs to the tarmac, where a black Range Rover was waiting. But Alistair's reach was long. As she stepped into the cool London air, a swarm of photographers who had gained access to the perimeter fence began shouting. Dr. Bennett? Did you strike Mr. Sterling? Is it true you used racial slurs against him? Are you resigning? Flashbulbs popped like lightning in the grey afternoon. Olivia ignored them, sliding into the back of the car. The door slammed shut, silencing the chaos. Inside the car sat a man she knew well. Richard Caldwell, the CEO of Sky High Airlines. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the last 7 hours. He was holding a tablet, watching a video of a news anchor, destroying Olivia's career. Richard, Olivia said calmly. It's good to see you, though I assume we're skipping the pleasantries. Richard didn't look at her. He stared out the window at the rain. He's pulling the ads, Olivia. He's threatening to sue the airline for $10 million for breach of contract and emotional distress. He's got half the board of directors calling for my head because I let my captain kick off a platinum partner. Your captain followed federal safety regulations, Olivia said, her voice hard. Alistair was a threat. Alistair is a monster, Richard snapped, finally turning to her. We both know that. But he's a monster who buys ink by the barrel. Do you see this? He shoved the tablet at her. He has witnesses. He paid off a couple in row 2. They gave statements saying you were hostile and erratic. Olivia looked at the screen. It was a lie, a complete fabrication. But it was moving fast. The comments section was a cesspool of hate. So what are you telling me, Richard? Olivia asked quietly. Are you rescinding the dinner invitation? Richard sighed, rubbing his temples. The board wants me to issue a public apology to Alistair. They want me to state that the airline regrets the incident and that the crew overreacted under your pressure. If you do that, Olivia said, her voice dropping to a whisper, you are undermining every flight crew in the industry. You are telling your pilots that money outranks safety. You are telling your flight attendants that they have to tolerate abuse if the passenger is rich enough. If you issue that apology, Richard, you aren't just betraying me. You're betraying your own people. Richard looked at her, his eyes pleading. I have shareholders, Olivia. Stock dropped 4% since the news broke this morning. I have to stop the bleeding. Then let it bleed, Olivia said. Because if you side with him, I won't just be the regulator you have dinner with. I will be the regulator who audits every single maintenance log you have filed since 1995. I will ground your fleet for a missing screw. The car was silent. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the rain on the roof. He's going to destroy you, Olivia, Richard warned softly. He has the tapes, the papers, the internet. You're one woman against a media empire. Olivia looked out the window at the grey London skyline. She thought of the fear in Beatrice's eyes. She thought of the arrogance in Alistair's voice. I'm not just one woman, Richard, she said, pulling her phone out again. I'm the woman who knows where the bodies are buried. Alistair thinks this is a PR battle. He thinks it's about headlines. She dialed a number. Who are you calling? Richard asked. The one person Alistair Sterling is actually afraid of, Olivia said. His ex-wife. The one who signed the NDA he's currently violating by running this smear campaign. She put the phone to her ear. Hello, Catherine, it's Olivia. Yes, I'm in London. No, I'm fine, but I think it's time we finally had that conversation about the Cayman accounts. Yes, the ones he hid from the divorce lawyers. Meet me at the Dorchester in an hour. She hung up and looked at Richard. A small, cold smile touched her lips. Drive me to the hotel, Richard. The war has just begun. The Dorchester Hotel on Park Lane stood like a fortress of old-world money against the grey London drizzle. Inside, the air smelled of lilies and expensive perfume. Dr. Olivia Bennett walked through the lobby, her heels clicking on the marble with a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. She wasn't wearing her flight attire anymore. She had changed into a sharp navy blue power suit that made her look less like a bureaucrat and more like a prosecutor. She found Catherine Sterling sitting in a secluded corner of the promenade, the hotel's tea room. Catherine was a woman who had once been a beauty queen, but 20 years of marriage to Alistair had etched deep lines of anxiety around her eyes. She wore oversized sunglasses indoors and clutched a glass of sherry with a trembling hand. Olivia, Catherine breathed as Dr. Bennett sat down. She didn't offer a hand. She just looked around nervously. He doesn't know I'm here. If he knew, he'd cut my alimony. He'd burn my house down. He won't be burning anything, Catherine, Olivia said softly, signaling the waiter to bring water. Because by tomorrow morning, Alistair won't have the matches, let alone the fuel. Catherine lowered her sunglasses. Her eyes were rimmed with red. You saw the news, he's destroying you. My phone has been blowing up with alerts. He's calling you unstable. He's digging up your divorce from 1998. Let him dig, Olivia said, her voice terrifyingly calm. He's fighting a PR war. I'm fighting a legal one. But I need the ammunition, Catherine. You told me once years ago at the Aspen Gala that Alistair had a hobby he kept off the books. You said if you ever left him, you'd take the blue ledger. Catherine froze. She looked down at her Chanel bag. It's not just a hobby, Olivia. It's a logistics operation. Explain, Olivia commanded gently. Catherine leaned in her voice a whisper. Sterling Media ships tons of equipment all over the world. Cameras, satellite uplinks, stage gear. They have a permanent cargo exemption because they are press. They bypass standard customs screening in 30 countries. Alistair uses his private fleet Sterling wings to move the gear. I know the fleet. Olivia nodded. I signed their certificate of airworthiness. 2 Gulfstream G650s and a Bombardier cargo jet. Those jets aren't just moving cameras, Catherine said, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a heavy encrypted hard drive. For the last 5 years, Alistair has been moving high-value art and uncertified gold bullion out of conflict zones in Africa and South America. He hides it inside the hollowed-out casings of the broadcast servers. He calls it asset relocation. I call it smuggling. Olivia stared at the hard drive. The noise of the hotel, the clinking china, the murmur of conversation seemed to fade away. This wasn't just about a rude passenger anymore. This wasn't just about Alistair being a bully. This was a federal crime. It was a violation of international aviation treaties. And it was happening on planes she regulated. He falsifies the manifests, Olivia asked, her mind racing through the legal implications. Every single one, Catherine confirmed. He forges the weight ratios. He bribes the ground crews in Lagos and Bogota. But he keeps the real records. He's obsessive, Olivia. He writes down every ounce of gold, every stolen painting, because he doesn't trust his partners. It's all in here. Dates, flight numbers, payload weights, and the names of the politicians he pays off to look the other way. Olivia placed her hand over the hard drive. The plastic felt cold. Why give this to me now, Catherine? Olivia asked. You could have gone to the FBI years ago. Catherine looked up, tears finally spilling over. Because the FBI can be bought. Alistair has friends in the Justice Department. But you're the FAA. You're the ICAOB. You control the sky, and today he humiliated you. He made the mistake of attacking the one woman who can actually ground him. Catherine pushed the drive across the table. He thinks he's a god, Olivia. He thinks the world is his playground. Please, show him he's just a passenger. Olivia took the drive and slipped it into her pocket. She didn't smile. She didn't look triumphant. She looked like a judge delivering a death sentence. Go to your sister's house in Cornwall, Catherine, Olivia said, standing up. Turn off your phone. Don't watch the news tonight. Why? Because, Olivia said, adjusting her blazer. I'm going to make a phone call to the International Air Transport Association and the Department of Homeland Security. And when the storm hits, I don't want you to get wet. The clock on the wall of the penthouse suite, a rare minimalist piece by Patek Philippe, ticked past 2:15 a.m. London lay beneath Alistair Sterling, a sprawling grid of wet pavement and slumbering commoners. From the 45th floor of his Knightsbridge residence, the city looked less like a metropolis and more like a circuit board, one that he usually controlled. Alistair stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, pressing his forehead against the cold, reinforced glass. In his hand, a crystal tumbler of Macallan 52, priced at roughly $4,000 a pour, swirled gently. He took a sip, the liquid fire settling the nerves that had been fraying since he stepped off Flight 882. He turned back to the room. It was a cavernous space of Italian marble and black leather, illuminated only by the ghostly blue glow of 6 high-definition monitors mounted on the far wall. They were his war room, and tonight they were showing a victory. The smear campaign he had orchestrated was not just working. It was a symphony of destruction. The trending topics on social media were dominated by the narrative he had crafted. @FireBennett was the #1 hashtag in the UK and the US. His tabloid, The Daily Clarion, had just run an exclusive from an anonymous source claiming Dr. Bennett had a history of medically diagnosed hysteria and anti-corporate bias. It was a lie entirely fabricated by Preston's team, but in the court of public opinion, truth was merely a suggestion. Alistair smiled, a thin, cruel curving of his lips. He picked up his tablet to check his email. There it was, the draft apology from Richard Caldwell. Sky High Airlines deeply regrets the unfortunate incident involving Mr. Sterling. We acknowledge that crew protocols were misapplied due to external pressure from a federal regulator. We are reviewing our relationship with Dr. Bennett. Perfect, Alistair whispered to the empty room, his voice echoing slightly off the hard surfaces. You stupid, arrogant woman. You thought a badge made you a god I buy gods. The adrenaline of the kill was intoxicating, more potent than the scotch. He felt invincible. He felt the sudden manic urge to consume, to purchase, to prove his dominance over the material world. He sat down at his desk, opening his laptop. He navigated to the Sotheby's private auction portal. There it was, Lot 402. A 1964 Aston Martin DB5 silver birch, previously owned by a minor royal. The current bid was £2.8 million. Chump change, Alistair muttered. He typed in a bid of £3.2 million. He wanted it. He deserved it. It would be his trophy for surviving the day. He hovered his finger over the submit bid button, savoring the moment. Click. The screen displayed a spinning wheel. Alistair leaned back, imagining driving the car through the English countryside, perhaps running Olivia Bennett off the road in his mind. The wheel stopped. A red box appeared in the center of the screen. Transaction declined. Contact issuer. Alistair frowned. He blinked, assuming he had misread it. He refreshed the page. He entered the bid again. Transaction declined. Code 05. Do not honor. Ridiculous. He spat, slamming the laptop shut. Useless technology. It had to be a glitch, a security algorithm tripping over itself because of the late hour or the location. He reached into his wallet and pulled out the card. The American Express Centurion, the black card. It was made of anodized titanium. It had no spending limit. It was the key that unlocked the world. He dialed the dedicated concierge number on the back. It usually rang once before a human picked up. Tonight it rang 4 times. Concierge services. A voice answered. It wasn't the usual cheerful, obsequious tone. The voice sounded stiff, guarded. This is Alistair Sterling, he barked. I'm trying to buy a car and your incompetence is embarrassing me. The card is declining. Fix it. Override the security hold immediately. Silence stretched on the line. Heavy, static-filled silence. Mr. Sterling, the operator said finally. I cannot override this hold, sir. What do you mean you can't? Do you know who I am? I spend 10 million a year on this card. I want your supervisor. Sir, my supervisor is standing right here. The operator's voice trembled slightly. We have received a flag on your account. It's not a bank hold, Mr. Sterling. It's a federal freeze. Alistair froze. The glass of scotch in his hand tilted dangerously. A freeze from who? The IRS. No, sir. The code is 44 Alpha. That comes from the Office of Foreign Assets Control in the United States cooperating with the UK Treasury. It's a sanctions and anti-money laundering block. It freezes everything. Credit, debit, liquid assets, holding companies. Sir, I'm technically not even supposed to be speaking to you. The line went dead. Alistair stared at the phone. OFAC. That was for terrorists, for drug lords, for dictators of rogue states, not for media tycoons. A cold knot of dread formed in his stomach, tight and painful. He scrambled for his phone again, his fingers fumbling over the screen. He opened his banking app. Access denied. He opened his investment portfolio. User suspended. He dialed his CFO, Marcus. Straight to voicemail. He dialed his personal lawyer. Straight to voicemail. Panic, sharp and jagged, began to shred his composure. He dialed Preston Ford, his editor-in-chief in New York. Pick up, pick up, pick up, Alistair hissed, pacing the room. Boss? Preston answered on the third ring. He sounded breathless. In the background, Alistair could hear shouting, the sound of heavy objects being moved, and the wail of sirens. Preston. My accounts are frozen. The credit cards aren't working. What the hell is happening? Boss, you need to. Preston's voice was cut off by a loud crash. You need to get out of there. They're here. The FBI is here. Where? At the office in Manhattan. They just kicked in the server room doors. Preston screamed. They have a warrant. Alistair. A federal warrant for the Sterling Wings logistics data. They're taking the physical drives. They're saying something about the blue ledger. The blood drained from Alistair's face so fast it left him dizzy. He dropped into his leather chair. The blue ledger. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. No one knew that name. No one. That was the internal code name for the encrypted partition on his private servers. The partition where he kept the real manifests. The records of the uncertified gold bullion from the Congo. The blood diamonds from Sierra Leone. The stolen Renaissance art from the private collections of toppled dictators. He had hidden the contraband inside the hollowed-out casings of his broadcast equipment, flying them around the world on his private jets under the guise of press freedom. It was the perfect crime. The customs agents never checked the heavy server racks of a major media corporation. Only one other person knew the name Blue Ledger. Catherine, his ex-wife. The woman he had bullied into silence. The woman he had discarded like a used napkin. She gave it to her. Alistair whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. She gave it to Bennett. Boss, are you there? Preston was yelling. They're asking for the flight logs for the G650. They're asking about the pilot in command. Alistair hung up. He threw the phone across the room. It bounced off the marble floor, but didn't break. He had to run. The freeze meant his money was gone, but he had emergency cashes. He had a safe deposit box in Dubai. He had gold bars in a vault in Zurich. But he had to get there. He grabbed a burner phone from his desk drawer, one he kept for his mistresses, and dialed the only number that could save him. Richard. Alistair gasped when the line connected. "Richard, listen to me carefully." "Alistair." Richard Caldwell's voice was weary. "It's 2:30 in the morning. I don't care what time it is, I need a plane. I need my plane. The G650 is in the hangar at Heathrow. I need you to authorize an emergency takeoff slot. File a flight plan for Dubai. Tell them it's a medical evacuation. I don't care what you tell them. Just get at me in the air." There was a long silence on the other end. Alistair could hear Richard breathing. "I can't do that, Alistair. Don't you dare tell me you can't!" Alistair screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. "I made you, Richard. I have the photos from the island. I will ruin you. Launch the damn jet." "I can't launch it, Alistair," Richard shouted back, his voice finally breaking through the subservience. "Because it's not just your plane anymore. The FAA and the EASA just issued a global grounding order for the entire Sterling Wings fleet. They revoked the certificates of airworthiness 5 minutes ago." Alistair gripped the edge of the desk. "Revoked on what grounds?" "International trafficking, safety violations, gross negligence." Richard paused, and his voice dropped to a terrified whisper. "Alistair, the order was signed by the chairwoman herself. She personally flagged your tail numbers as hostile assets. If your pilots try to start the engines, they will be arrested on the tarmac." "She can't do this," Alistair shrieked. "She's just a bureaucrat." "She's the regulator, Alistair. She owns the sky, and she just closed it." Click. Alistair stared at the dead phone. The silence of the penthouse was suddenly broken by a new sound. It came from outside, down on the street. Whoop, whoop, the sharp, piercing chirp of a siren. Then another. Then a cacophony. Alistair ran to the window. He looked down from his glass tower. The street below, usually dark and quiet, was awash in blue and red light. A convoy of black vans had screeched to a halt in front of the building. Men in heavy tactical gear were pouring out, carrying battering rams and assault rifles. The intercom on his wall buzzed. It was the doorman downstairs. "Mr. Sterling, police, they—" The voice was cut off by the sound of shouting and the crash of a heavy door being breached. Alistair backed away from the window. He looked around his penthouse. The marble, the art, the expensive scotch. It all looked like a stage set now, a fake world built on stolen gold and intimidation. Heavy boots thundered in the hallway outside his suite. Boom. The front doors of his penthouse shuddered. "Police, open up!" Boom. The wood splintered. Alistair didn't move. He couldn't. He was paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of it. He was Alistair Sterling. This didn't happen to him. This happened to poor people. This happened to people who sat in economy. The doors burst open. A dozen officers from the National Crime Agency swarmed the room. Weapons raised their voices, a blur of commands. "Hands, show me your hands! Get on the ground now!" Alistair was seized. Rough hands grabbed his bespoke silk pajamas, twisting his arms behind his back. The cold steel of handcuffs bit into his wrists, a sensation so foreign, so violative, that he gasped. They dragged him out of the suite, past the shattered door frame, past the terrified neighbors peeking out. They hauled him into the elevator and down 45 floors. When they shoved him out into the cool London night, the flashbulbs blinded him. But these weren't the paparazzi he paid. These were police photographers. The officer pushing him toward the transport van paused for a moment to adjust his grip. In that second, Alistair looked up. Across the street, standing next to an unmarked black sedan, was a figure. A woman. She was holding a large black umbrella against the drizzle. She was wearing a trench coat belted tightly. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't frowning. She was simply watching. Their eyes locked. Even from the distance, Alistair felt the weight of her gaze. It was the same look she had given him on the plane when he demanded she move. A look of absolute, unshakable certainty. She held a phone to her ear, but she wasn't speaking. She was just looking at him. As the officers shoved Alistair into the back of the van, forcing his head down, he felt a vibration in the pocket of his pajama bottoms. The burner phone. He hadn't dropped it. The heavy doors of the police van slammed shut, plunging him into darkness. He managed to contort his body, his handcuffed hands fumbling to pull the phone partially out of his pocket, to see the screen glowing in the dark. One new message. Sender Dr. Olivia Bennett. He squinted at the text, his breath hitching in his throat. Seat 1A is now available, but I don't think you can afford the ticket anymore. Alistair Sterling closed his eyes and leaned his head against the metal wall of the van. The siren wailed a long, mournful sound that signaled the end of the flight. The fall of Alistair Sterling wasn't just a news story. It was a cultural event. In the weeks following the raid on his London penthouse, the Sterling Empire didn't just crumble, it vaporized. The forensic accounting team, armed with Catherine's hard drive, uncovered a labyrinth of corruption that spanned 3 continents. The gold smuggling was just the tip of the iceberg. There was tax evasion, bribery of foreign officials, and massive violations of international trade sanctions. The media, which Alistair had controlled for so long, turned on him with the vicious enthusiasm of a liberated prisoner. The very newspapers he owned were forced to print the headlines of his disgrace to save their own credibility. The photos of him being led into the Old Bailey court in handcuffs, looking haggard and unshaven, replaced the pristine, airbrushed headshots he had mandated for decades. The trial was the spectacle of the year. Alistair's defense team, a phalanx of London's most expensive barristers, tried to paint him as a victim of a corporate conspiracy. They argued that he was unaware of the logistics of his own private fleet, that he was a frail man suffering from altitude-induced delirium during the incident on Flight 882. It might have worked, too, if not for the prosecution's star witness when Dr. Olivia Bennett took the stand. The courtroom went silent. She didn't look like a victim. She wore a simple grey suit, her posture impeccable. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She simply laid out the facts of aviation law with the precision of a surgeon. Mr. Sterling's behavior on the aircraft was not a medical episode, Olivia stated, looking directly at the jury. It was a manifestation of a belief system, a belief that his comfort superseded the safety regulations that protect us all. He believed he was above the law. I am simply here to remind the court that at 35,000 feet, gravity applies to everyone equally. And on the ground, so does justice. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Fraud, smuggling, endangerment of an aircraft. The judge, a stern woman who had clearly followed the case with distaste for Alistair's arrogance, delivered the sentence. Mr. Sterling, you have spent your life looking down on people. You have treated the world as your personal fiefdom. You will now have ample time to reflect on your humility. I am sentencing you to 12 years in Her Majesty's prison, Belmarsh. Belmarsh, the British Guantanamo, a high-security prison for terrorists and the most dangerous criminals. No private cells, no Dom Perignon, and certainly no extra leg room. 6 months later. The visitation room at Belmarsh was cold, smelling of bleach and despair. Alistair sat on a bolted-down plastic chair. He had lost 20 pounds. His silver hair was thin and unkempt. The bespoke Brioni suits were gone, replaced by a grey prison uniform that scratched his skin. He wasn't expecting a visitor. His friends had abandoned him the moment the assets were frozen. His children were suing him for their trust funds. When the heavy steel door opened, he looked up, expecting his lawyer with more bad news. It wasn't his lawyer. Dr. Olivia Bennett stood on the other side of the glass partition. She looked exactly as she had on the plane, calm, professional, unbothered. She picked up the phone receiver. Alistair hesitated, his hand shaking before picking up his own. "Why are you here?" he croaked. His voice was a shadow of its former boom. To gloat, to laugh at the animal in the cage. "I don't gloat, Alistair," Olivia said quietly. "I'm here on business." "Business?" He let out a dry, bitter laugh. "I have no business. You took it all. I'm here to inform you that the Aviation Board has finished its audit of Sterling wings," she said, sliding a piece of paper against the glass. "We are selling off the fleet to pay the back wages of the pilots and crew you stiffed for the last 6 months. The G650 you were so proud of. It's being repurposed as a medical transport jet for infectious diseases." Alistair stared at her, his jaw tightening. "And," Olivia continued, "I brought you something." She held up a small rectangular object. It was a standard flimsy economy class boarding pass. But the destination didn't say London or New York. It was a souvenir ticket, framed in cheap plastic. "I kept this from your original flight," she said. "Seat 1A. I thought you might want a reminder of the seat that cost you everything." Alistair slammed the phone against the glass. "Get out. You ruined my life." "I was Alistair Sterling." "You were," Olivia corrected, standing up. She looked at him with a gaze that wasn't angry, but filled with a devastating pity. "Now you're just inmate 8940. You wanted me to move seats, Alistair. You wanted me out of your sight. Well, congratulations. You're finally alone." She hung up the phone. As she walked away, the guard came over to escort Alistair back to his cell. "Let's go, Sterling," the guard grunted, grabbing his arm. "Move it." "Don't touch me," Alistair snapped instinctively. "I am—" "You're nobody," the guard interrupted, shoving him forward. "Now get in line. You're sitting in the back of the van today." Alistair stumbled forward, the heavy steel doors clanging shut behind him, sealing him in the darkness he had created for himself. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of how Alistair Sterling learned the hardest lesson of his life. He thought his money made him bulletproof. He thought he could snap his fingers and make people disappear. But he forgot the golden rule of travel. You never ever mess with the person holding the rule book. From a private jet lifestyle to a shared cell in Belmarsh, Alistair lost his fortune, his freedom and his dignity. All because he couldn't handle sitting next to a powerful black woman in first class. It's a brutal reminder that character is revealed not by how you treat your equals, but by how you treat people you think are beneath you. In this case, the person he thought was beneath him turned out to be the one flying the plane. I hope you enjoyed this story of high-altitude justice. If you felt a little bit of satisfaction seeing karma hit back that hard, please smash that like button. It really helps the video reach more people. And I want to hear from you. What is the worst behavior you have ever seen on an airplane? Have you ever had to deal with an Alistair in real life? Tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. We post new dramas every week. Until next time, stay humble and fly safe.